What's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to the Mishmash Podcast. Today, I have my first three-time defending champion guest, Mike English, coming back to round out the summer trifecta of our music discussion. Our never-ending, constantly meandering, but incredibly entertaining and fulfilling musical discussion.
At least to us, it's entertaining.
That's it.
And that's really all that counts.
Yeah. If I can entertain myself, I've already succeeded for the day.
Yeah, exactly.
It's funny. The kids have been into music since they were in diapers. I mean, it's just something that they couldn't help but grow up around. But what's interesting now is they're beginning to sort of branch out and do their own things. I don't know how it happened. I may have mentioned this the last time because I think it was beginning back then. But my littler two, Sarah and Jackson, are huge Taylor Swift fans. And I know this because I was sitting in the living room one night. And do you guys have like an Apple TV? Have you ever seen that?
We have. Well, no, I don't have an Apple TV, but I mean, I get Apple TV on my TV.
Right. So it's, integrated into the phone and whatnot. Mm-hmm. And so I have mine set to be like the secondary remote. And so if someone turns one of the devices on and starts to search for something, it pops up on mine. So I use this as the giant child that I am to mess with them, and start changing their searches and stuff. But it comes up with Jackson's, Apple TV. And I look, and all of a sudden he starts typing like Tay-Tay's hottest hits or something like silly like that. And I was just like, wow, I'm too stunned to mess with this. And I went in there, and sure enough, him and Sarah were having it on as background music when they were doing Tay-Tay. That's her nickname. Her nickname is Tay-Tay. So, but it's so funny because they will vacillate from Taylor Swift to Billy Joel to Slipknot to all kinds of, crazy stuff. But it's interesting, that a lot of it, especially the Taylor Swift stuff, they've just come to on their own. Like, it's not like they're not old enough to be a part of like the craze. I'm assuming popular. There's a craze.
No, yeah. Oh, she's huge all over the world, it seems now. A fact that I don't understand, but then again, I'm 67. Right. I'm not supposed to get Taylor Swift, I think.
But it's interesting too. Well, and that's just it. So I'm curious because the only songs I know from her are the really early ones where she must have been 16, the Teardrops on My Guitar and the Tim McGraw song, unless that's the same one. Again, it shows how little I know about her music.
And I know less.
But I'm not averse to it. And that's the thing, right? Like, I've always been curious where my kids are concerned in terms of the musical rebellion, right? Like, I feel like, I know for me, I didn't necessarily rebel against my parents with music, but I definitely began to explore heavier stuff. And then rap and hip hop was big in Brooklyn at the time. So I was listening to things that they would absolutely have no interest in whatsoever.
Yeah. I think that's kind of universal because I'm from the early rock and roll years, and my parents could not stand that music. They're like, what the hell is this shit?
Just a bunch of noise.
Yeah, exactly. That's all it was noise, of course.
But there was that cultural generational gap there. And I'm curious to see with my kids, it's going to be tougher. Put it this way, it's going to be tougher for them when their father listens to like Mongolian throat singing and, hybrid Rastafarian, whatever, to find something that I wouldn't be interested in, like
that you find tasteless.
Right. Exactly. And so, I mean, and I don't get the sense that Taylor Swift is that, but it's funny because I am curious about exploring some of her other stuff more from a musical standpoint, because I don't think she gets a ton of credit for being a singer-songwriter. I know that probably sounds ludicrous to some people, but in the same way that Adele or Ed Sheeran or some of these other artists, I know Adele writes with other people. She has songs written for her. Ed Sheeran writes a lot of his stuff with other people. Right. And so with Taylor Swift, I feel like it's sort of the same thing, but maybe recently there's been a shift a little bit in terms of the amount of respect she gets tied to her popularity. I don't know. All I know is I appreciate singer-songwriters a little more, just knowing, like, I don't know, there's just something intimate to me about writing my own song, putting my own lyrics to it, writing the own melody. Yeah. I don't understand, like, Diane Warren, who writes, 7,000 hits that are all amazing songs, right. But I can't imagine being one of those artists and coming in and taking her songs and
Yeah. I think I agree in that there's obvious talent there because she is writing a lot of her own material. I mean, to me, it's just pop, but still, it is talent. I mean, and an artist that I just thought of, you're talking about, Carole King wrote so many songs that she just gave away.
Right.
Before she got the courage, the nerve to, put herself in front of the microphone and sing them herself, because she is fantastic.
And
still.
So I guess I can walk my statement back a little bit in the sense that I understand when an artist has an established song and then someone else provides their rendition of it and makes it their own, right? So even saying in that same realm, How Do I Live, I think 99% of people associate that with LeAnn Rimes, but it was a Trisha Yearwood song. Okay. And there are just so many instances. Hurt is my favorite Nine Inch Nails song. Johnny Cash covered that and did such a different approach to it that it's almost like two completely different songs. And then there's other instances. I don't know. Is it Patti Smith? Bruce Springsteen wrote Because the Night, and there was some sort of, I don't know if it was a contract dispute. There was some issue that prevented him from recording and releasing it. And so he gave it to, was it Patti Smith or Natalie Merchant, maybe?
I think it was Patti Smith.
It was Patti Smith, right?
Smith. And that's odd because he did eventually release it as well.
Right.
And oddly enough, I was at the Hazlitt Pool Club the other day and listening to, they had CBS, 101 on their radio there that they play in the park. And I heard a cover of Peter Frampton's Baby, I Love Your Way. And I was like, just so upset. I'm like, no.
Was it the Big Mountain version?
I don't know. No, it wasn't Peter Frampton. I don't know who it was that was singing it, but it was a woman. And I'm like, no. This is just can't happen.
Blasphemy.
This is blasphemy. Yes, blasphemy. I say.
Right, and so it's funny. There are certain songs that it's just sort of verboten to ever imagine them being covered and altered. Yeah, forget about that, because that's the thing, right? There's two ways. I think we discussed this briefly once before, but it's funny. My kids cannot stand covers. I don't know why. It's like a hard stance that they have.
I can understand that. Yeah.
Shaking their fists at the clouds.
I can remember. I don't remember the exact year. It was in the 1990s, but I was at the now defunct TWA terminal at JFK and in an elevator. The first time I heard Stairway to Heaven as Muzak.
Oh.
And I was just... I think I almost had a heart attack. It's just, no, this just can't be. But I guess it happens to every song eventually. And we have discussed this. There are but 8 notes, and you can only have so many songs. So somebody's going to cover it eventually.
Right, and this is a point of contention specifically with Jackson, who, as the youngest member here, you would think wouldn't have such developed takes on music, but he's not a fan of live versions of songs, not counting being at a concert, like on the radio.
Right.
And he's not a fan of covers, and I get it. I am a huge fan of the original recordings of whatever it happens to be. Because you have to think, like, that becomes the genesis moment. That's the default part of the song. But what I try to explain to him is things will sound different live, but that's okay. Like, we've heard certain covers where they're missing a key instrument or, it's just not the same delivery, which is one thing that I hate so much. I remember seeing the Goo Goo Dolls at Jones Beach. $10 tickets. It was great.
Right.
He didn't sing the choruses for half of the major hits, and then the other half he was like syncopating the rhythm. So if you were trying to sing along, you couldn't.
You
because,
got lost.
Yeah, and Jakob Dylan was another one. Jakob Dylan and Johnny Resnick both
you
did
had
that.
told me about Jacob changing the words to the songs.
And it's so I understand it from that side. But what I explained to Jackson, especially where like the Foo Fighters are concerned, is sometimes when you have the song live, you get a special something new that would never be there in the recorded version.
Right. As a rule, I actually prefer live recordings because I think it's as the song was really meant to be. You don't get to dub it 3 times over and add 6 more guitars or whatever, but it's bare. That's how it should be.
And not only that, I think that I can come to this more from a writing standpoint. Early on, any writer, I would think, lacks a certain degree of self-confidence. And so my problem with the first two books that I wrote was that I rewrote them incessantly. Like, and that's the problem too with being able to self-publish, is you need to develop that ability to sort of constrain yourself, because otherwise you're going to be in a never-ending cycle of improving, altering. I can't say
trying to
improving.
get perfect, and nothing can be perfect. Yes.
Exactly.
Oh, I can't. And you know what? We all have that same problem with confidence at times.
Absolutely, it's more
It's the human condition.
For me, it was perfectionism, right? It was that notion that there are perfect words here, and I need to find them and arrange them in a perfect way. And obviously, that's not
Right. And don't you love this music discussion?
right. Yeah, no.
As we are wont to do.
We're working our way back there. No, so in terms of music, I think of that recording, right, on an album as being like a book that's in print. You have what's considered, in some sense, that is the finite, final version of that medium. However, if it's something in print, you have the opportunity to re-release the book. Stephen King did this when he wrote the Dark Tower series, and yes, this is now we're veering out of the music realm.
Again.
But he wrote I think the Gunslinger in like 1970, and he wrote the fourth book it was late in the 90s or early 2000s, a huge gap of time between them.
Sure.
And so by the time he started to really hit his stride in the final books, 4, 5, 6, and 7, so many new ideas and things came that didn't jive with the initial one, that he almost had to go back and sort of add a couple of things here or there and alter it, right? And so that's where I think of, in terms of the music, which I knew we'd get back there eventually. Yeah. In terms of a song, you do the best that you can on the album, and remember too, there's other constraints. The odds are you're spending somebody's money in a studio somewhere,
course. Right?
So it has to be finished. It has to reach a point of completion. It doesn't necessarily mean that it's finished. And so that's where what you were saying about like the live recordings, I agree. I think that is the truest form of those songs, because now they have an opportunity to play them in a live setting and add something, change something, do something different. That, again, the Foo Fighters, the first band that come to mind. In the original version of Monkey Wrench, it's just like a straightforward, pop rock song. But when they play it live, there's more soloing, there's more extra things that they add in that I almost can't listen to the CD version now, because it's missing something that came afterwards.
Missing, right, the real interesting solo that, they couldn't put on the record, because you do have time constraints, with any recorded music.
So I understand where Jackson's coming from, but also, again, I think because I have so many live versions or covers that I prefer to the original, I can't take that same hard stance.
As the saying goes, we'll just agree to disagree on that. Right. Sorry, Jackson.
Right. But to sort of circle back to I'll call it the Diane Warren or the Max Martin, issue. I think with pop music, which is inherently artificial and superficial, which is fine. I think you can get away with it more. And it's not that, like, again, right? I'm thinking of, like, I don't know if she wrote I'll Be. She wrote a song for Edwin McCain. It was a huge hit. It might have been his second, I Could Not Ask for More. But either way, like, those songs are sentimental. They're love songs. It's not just, the bubblegum pop stuff that we were talking about. But for me, there's a huge difference between a song like that sounds good, that's, recorded well, and something like Bob Seger, right? Bob Seger, can you imagine someone else writing Turn the Page or Night Moves for him, right? Like what gives those songs their power is, at least in my mind, the authenticity of it. Now, I'm going to be mortified if I'm going to have to look this up when we're done. If it turns out that he didn't write
he had
it,
a co-write.
Right. I think we talked about this the last time, that Glenn Frey every time. Glenn Frey and Jackson Browne co-wrote Take It Easy.
Right.
And so there's like, again, this like apocryphal discussion. It wasn't Winslow, Arizona. It was actually this other place in Arizona. It's like a melding of stuff. So,
but Winslow fit.
Right. And that's just it. So in essence, let's say it wasn't 100% true for Seger. That may not matter. I think it's his take on it. The song had to come through him to succeed the way that it does.
Right. And as we are talking about covers, can you even imagine somebody else working Night Moves? No, that's Bob Seger's. They are his songs. I can't envision somebody else covering them and doing them true justice, because they were songs from a moment. a moment in our lives. Like that was the early to mid 70s. That was
I mean, I think you just hit on the title of your memoir, right? What a great turn of phrase there. Well, so like Billy Joel with Piano Man, same thing. I've heard a million people cover it, and all it does is the best ones are just the closest approximation to what he does, and those ones that succeed just make me think of how great his version is, because it's his story, like you said.
Oh, absolutely.
Which, perfect segue right to the Americana discussion.
There you go.
So,
and we already hit Carole King, because can't get more Americana than Carole.
No, and it's interesting because I feel like each decade obviously has its own influences, its own cultures that surround it. So I just feel like the 50s and 60s for me are sort of like that golden era, not necessarily of the music that came out of it, but maybe some of the music that looks back on it, because it does so with those rose tinted glasses, right? Like,
without a doubt.
And I think that there is, and again too, right? Like you're talking about, it's easy to say Americana and assume that's the same experience for everybody. It's not. It's
not
sort
even
of
close.
like a narrow
Because
sliver.
even Americana has so many stages, if you will. I mean, going back to the 50s and early 60s, you had doo-wop music. These guys were fantastic, and they didn't use any instruments at all. I mean, my God. I obviously have listened to doo-wop extensively in my life. The talent just, it floors you. But you move on from there. I mean, and I know I turned you on to Kepmo.
Yeah.
That's basically from the 2000s. You know?
Wow,
And,
that's right, yeah.
Yeah, but there's nothing more American than his sound.
Right, exactly. And
But it's very different.
right. For me, I guess, if I had to define what I think of as Americana, obviously it's going to be reflective of my own experience, right? So I'm thinking sort of like middle class, working class, East Coast experience, but being able to relate to Midwest, Corn Belt sort of experiences, because it's different. It's different culturally. There's Black Americana, Latin music. There's so many different things. It's tough to give a catch-all. So I'm saying, just to define it more, that's what I think of in terms of like Pink Houses, right? It was a song we discussed a little bit from Mellencamp.
Yep, John Mellencamp, yeah.
Jack and Diane, and I think that's what I love the most about music is the storytelling aspect of it, because I think you just hit it a minute ago. Like, it captures a moment. It's a moment in time, and it can be more than just like an actual event, isn't it in American Pie, right, that they talk about the day the music died?
Yes, and absolutely.
So, right. So there are specifics like that, but then there's also, I feel like the best music captures a moment, a feeling, I don't know. And I don't know that exists as much anymore.
Right. And, well, now, Americana, I mean, we could trace it, really. You can trace it back basically to gospel, because you had gospel and then that became the blues when you had all your field workers, and that's really where it started, I guess.
Right.
But, and it moves on, and you have the Beach Boys. You there are so many avenues that it's gone down.
And it transcends too, like, again, transcends cultures, right? Like, you look at, again, biased because this is what I know the most, but like, in Ireland, music is so important. It's not just the music itself, but it's the storytelling aspect of it, and it's so, I guess there's identity that's caught up or tied into, interwoven, let's say, within the music itself. And I think that it gives people something to identify with, which is...
Oh no, you touched on one of my all-time favorite songs in American Pie. I mean, if you listen to that song, it just covers so much of our history almost with music. That was such a great song.
Yeah, and it's a shame because he had other hits, but nothing that
came close to matching that. Yeah, he did have some other very good songs, actually.
I guess I got to try to sew these threads back together. So what I was... Good luck. When I mentioned the Taylor Swift thing with the kids, it was because they were setting up a playlist for themselves. And so that's something that I'm going to do with them now, over the weekend rather, is I'm going to come up with different playlists for them of, of all varieties. But
Right.
one of the things that I love is what I think of as like nostalgia songs, right? So American Pie, Pink Houses, some of Tom Petty's stuff, most of Tom Petty's stuff,
Yeah.
that it just sort of harkens back. I don't know, it gets you right in the heartstrings a little bit, and it's funny because for me, I didn't live through, that era. Like, I'm always amazed when someone's like, we're conversing about whatever topic we're discussing, and somehow it'll come up and they'll say, oh, yeah, and, when I graduated high school in 83, and I was like, holy shit, I was born in 83.
1983, what was that?
But music is one of those great equalizers because even if I wasn't there, like you
Right, you can experience
Right.
it because it's, when you hear it for the first time, it's fresh
Right.
to you.
and
Even though it's a 20-year-old song, I mean, it's still fresh.
exactly, and the meaning is just sort of inherent. I do have to ask though, 83, what tours were you on? and there, right there.
1983. I was kind of out of the concert. No, I can't say I was out of it at that point. We were still going to Who shows. 83, did Robert Plant tour in 83?
I was going to
I
ask
think?
if Plant.
I don't think it might have been 83. It could have been 84 once he started a solo career.
Well, I think you'd remember if it was 84 though, right?
Yeah. Well, 82 was the year I got married. So 83, we were, I guess, starting to nest, if you will. But yeah, 1983.
Now, so
See, the 80s were kind of a barren time in music, I felt. It was, what was the joke? It's just a flock of seagulls.
Well, that was one of the that was the zig that I referenced earlier. Was I can't stand the 80s generally in terms of the musical
As a
output.
rule,
It's not
yeah.
my. There's just not enough to it. Now, that's not to say that I don't like 80s stuff. Funny enough, I went through a little kick of like this fake synthwave stuff where it was 80 music that was written now, but inspired by the 80s sound. So the synthesizers, all that fun stuff. But just most of the songs that came out then, I don't know. Like I feel like there's so much variety in the 60s and even to a lesser extent maybe the 70s if you avoid the disco,
Right, if you
song.
just cut out that kind of 3 or 4 years. No, the 70s were actually, more the early 70s, I'll say, such a really fantastic period of music. And going back to the 80s, I'm trying to remember exactly when The Wall came out. I don't know if that was like 78, 79, or if it was in the 80s.
I think it was the end of the 70s.
Okay, yeah. Again, remember,
No, but
old and dementia is setting in as we speak.
but the music will always be there.
Yeah. Oh, I have a song in my head all the time. It's the only way to survive.
So, well, got to keep the voices entertained, or at least drown them out a little bit. No, but like thinking of the 70s, right? Like bands like America or Kansas, like even if there were similarities in sound somewhat, the output was just so different. Yes, and being another great band, right? But then you look at the 80s, and I don't even just mean like, the glam rock stuff. Like that's just not anything that I was interested in. Like, and to be fair, I can appreciate the musicianship, right? Like
Absolutely.
in terms of Van Halen.
George Michael's extremely talented, but I had no interest in Wham.
Right.
It didn't do it for me.
Although Careless Whisper is
No, I mean, again, it wasn't my cup of tea, if you will.
Right.
I was still more into your heavy rock and roll. And actually, Deep Purple they were touring in the 80s. I know I saw them a few times.
well, right. So that it was a weird time for 70s bands that were sort of riding through. Heart was one we talked about.
Yeah.
The 80s for bands that were established in the 70s, even Judas Priest. Like, I don't know. Like, again, I feel like with a lot of bands, when you look at their catalog, things got weird for them in the 80s.
Oh, well, even into the late 70s, it got weird. I mean, come on, the Rolling Stones
Well,
did disco music.
Well, to be fair, they've been around long enough to have done every kind of music.
This is true. And they have pretty much. And again, not one of my favorites, but talent, you can admire it.
Right. And there's certain, it's funny. I have songs that I would say are in my list of favorites that are from the 80s. But just if you were to say, pick one decade, start to finish, that you'd never listen to again, that's the only one that I would even entertain.
Yeah,
but I like bands like.
If you have to not hear music from a decade, which one will it be? Yeah, definitely the '80s. Yeah,
I like Foreigner. I like
that's a band, and Bad Company.
Bad Company's another one.
Yeah.
But see, that's the thing. To me, they were still rock bands. Like, feels like the first time.
Jimmy Page toured as Jimmy Page,
Right. But
then he had the Firm. They were the '80s, but sorry, they didn't quite. Yeah.
But I like the ballads, and that's
Asia. I forgot Asia.
Asia's another one.
Yeah, Steve Howe.
But they were '70s and '80s, right? They were didn't.
I don't know. I think Asia was a product of the '80s.
Maybe I'm thinking of Toto.
I could be no, pardon?
Toto?
No, Asia just was Steve Howe, Trevor Downs.
Right, but I'm saying Toto was 70s and 80s.
Toto definitely 70s, 80s. Yes, Toto was around early. Yeah.
Steve Lukather. And
yeah.
He's a prolific just producer of music, not necessarily
and someone who didn't get a lot of credit. I felt that he had earned, because they were really good. They weren't like your superstars of music, but they were solid.
He has some weird connection. All right, so I believe it was "Beat It" from Michael Jackson that had Eddie Van Halen play the guitar solo, but maybe Lukather overdubbed it. I don't know. If you look up "Beat It," it's a weird confluence of
there were a lot,
unbelievable stars.
Michael Jackson got a lot of people with great talent to work with him on that. That was, again, that's from the '80s.
But he's so far off on his own. Same thing with like Whitney Houston. There's just so many unbelievably talented performers from that era. But again, I think it's more. I'm not necessarily thinking of the personnel. It's the music.
It's a
itself.
taste,
right?
Yeah, it just wasn't to my taste,
right,
or your taste, or whatever. Yeah. Again, I love my rock and roll. That's all, and that wasn't rock and roll for the most part.
Right. I was more, like the ballads again from Foreigner, or what was the other one, Mister, Broken Wings, right? Like those kinds of songs I enjoy, but some of the power ballad ones. So what was that, like Poison?
Yeah.
Yes. That just never. It just never clicked with me for some reason.
And I'm pretty sure we had touched on this before, but and from the '80s, how they started with a lot of the programmed. Robert Plant was actually in an interview said that I got carried away with the synthesized drum kit, like just not real music.
But yeah, so in terms of the '80s, that's just the only era that I don't resonate with, because the 2000s and, well, I shouldn't say the only. If I had to pick another decade.
Here we go.
It would be the 2010s, so 2010 to 2019. There's really not much that came out then that tickled my fancy either. Just odd things here and there. But there's also no cohesive sound, I would say.
Okay.
That or predominant.
See, now I can't go with that just because of my new musical crush, if you will. Tedeschi Trucks. I think they formed around, I want to say 2012. In that area.
That recent? Oh, I didn't realize that.
Oh, yeah, they've only been at it for like 10 or 12 years.
So what was it? Was it the Derek Trucks band before that?
No. Actually, Susan had her own solo career, and Derek Trucks was kind of busy with the brothers.
He was still with.
Oh, he toured with the Allman Brothers band forever.
I know. I thought that he had something. So obviously that's where I remember him starting.
I don't know if he started the Derek Trucks band, or if maybe because they were in a relationship that they just said, hey, why don't we do this? And the rest is history, as they say.
So what is it about that group that makes it your current favorite or one of your all-time favorites?
Yeah, the fact that they're a jam band, yet they also will go into the traditional 3 to 4 minute song as well. They cover it all, and Michael loves his guitars, and Derek Trucks is an absolute master, especially when he's playing slide guitar.
I was just going to say, the slide guitar.
But he's quite a guitarist in his own right without playing slide. I mean, I told my daughter, I said, you need to listen to their version of Layla Actually, you need to listen to the original version of Layla too, because the original version of Layla has one of the most touching piano solos. The outro, right? The piano outro. Well, Derek does that on a slide in Layla Revisited.
Oh, wow.
And it is every bit as touching. I mean, I told her it almost brings me to tears how good it is. I mean, it's the boy can just play.
And right. and you could tell the music is sort of like flowing through him, for lack of a better, you know,
well,
I know it sounds kind of trite, but
but this is a kid. Well, he's 50. I call him a kid. But as a 10 to 12-year-old, he was playing with B.B. King.
Right.
I mean, he's a prodigy, and he's kept at it. I mean, I liken him to, you know, Joe Bonamassa as far as someone that's just mastered the craft of guitar. I mean, it might be a meaningless career, you know, in the grand scheme of things, but it's extremely entertaining.
Right, and there's levels to it. There are incredibly proficient guitarists, right? Yeah. So you have your Nuno Betancourts and your Eddie Van Halen's, Wolfgang Van Halen,
Satriani,
right?
Yeah.
I think of those as like the virtuoso sort of guitarists, which is
I can't think of his name now. Ingve.
Oh, Malmsteen, yeah.
Malmsteen, yes. Yeah.
Right,
I mean,
exactly.
They're just, right, they're virtuosos.
And it's great. If you're into that sort of thing, there's a band called Dragon Force. It's the same kind of thing. I'm more intrigued by artists who can sort of make it sing, you know, and that's where you look at somebody like Jack White. Gary Clark Jr. is probably... Gary Clark Jr. I think is the heir apparent, let's say, for like a B.B. King or some of these other guys, but with more of a modern flair. I think he's an Austin guy too, and Austin has become like the epicenter of you know,
it seems of
blues,
great blues players. Yeah. And right, you mentioned Jack White. I forget who it was that said he thought that White Stripes was the Led Zeppelin of the 90s.
Yeah, I can see that.
And well, Jack White is just so extremely talented. But now going back to, you know, Tedeschi Trucks, Susan also is such a great vocalist. I mean, actually, I think she was born to sing the blues. It's kind of sounds silly, but yeah, but she has a wonderful, wonderful voice.
Yeah, no, it's not silly at all.
Yeah,
because singing the blues and playing—that's the thing, right? When you're playing the blues on guitar, the way B.B. King does or Gary Clark. It is singing. It's just not using the voice.
Well, now you touch on BB. Did you know that you will never, on any of his recordings, hear him singing whilst playing? Because he's letting Lucille talk when he's playing the guitar. And then he might just be strumming. Right. But he's not he's not like really getting down and playing the blues when he is singing. He'll do the verse and then he'll do a solo. And that was and in an interview he actually did. He was like, I got to let Lucille have her say. Yeah, you know, Lucille was his guitar for anyone who is not aware.
It's wild too because they sort of lose themselves when they're playing, and
you can see it. I mean, they're not there. I mean, you just. They go to that special place, and
not counting psychedelic rock, right?
No. Just this is, you know, they feel it. You that's something that I don't think you can fake.
No, and the closest approximation to that in a very different way, almost a more cerebral way, I think, is jazz, like hardcore jazz. You know, Miles Davis, all these different artists, especially again, back in the 50s, 60s, who were. Just the musicianship is unbelievable, and they get into the pocket, and it's just a listening experience that transcends what you're hearing. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Count Basie. I mean, yeah. Again, back to Americana.
I forgot that it was Friday. Speaking of Americana, garbage truck.
Ours has already been and gone. Yeah, they get here early for us. But
at least they didn't take the squeaky truck today. But before I forget, one artist you might want to check out is Aaron Jones. So Ayron.
Oh, I thought you were going to say Aaron.
No. He's from Seattle.
Okay, Aaron Jones.
Aaron Jones. So he's. Some of his stuff, he's an American guitarist. Some of his stuff is a little heavier, but it is very blues, spiritually at least, blues based. And he's starting to be up and coming. Again, not in the same like Gary Clark Jr. sense, but being from, it's interesting to hear his sound being from Seattle,
Right.
but he connects, I don't know, just on a different level.
I actually have a Gary Clark story.
Yeah.
Now, a long time ago, obviously a long time ago, I was still driving for the limousine service. I was requested and picked up a guy not a lot, but often enough, who worked for Island Records, I think it was, at the time. I know he ended up working for a couple different companies, and we got into these conversations about, music and what we liked. And then one day, he actually asked me for my address. I got this big package, and it had literally dozens of CDs. And one of them was Gary Clark. It was just like on a small label before anybody knew who Gary Clark even was.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and it was just a live show from Austin, Texas, or some city in Texas. And I was like blown away. I'm like, wow, who is this guy? And it was Gary Clark Jr.
That's wild.
So yeah, it's the gentleman ended up moving out to L.A. Again, Island Records. I guess they moved all their offices out there.
Right.
So I don't get to see him anymore. Well, and I don't work anymore either. But that's a story for
Right.
another day too. But yeah, he turned me on to a lot of really, really obscure music. So.
Well, you couldn't have picked a better segue. So we hit the zig with the 80s. So here's the zag that I wanted to get into. We've held a fairly straightforward, knock in the discussion in terms of the styles of music. That's what I wanted to ask you, though, in terms of the really more obscure things that you might be interested in. So Keb' Mo is a great example, right? Like
He's obscure.
Where do you fall?
Check it out. It's called Slow Down by Keb' Mo, Kebmo.
And what's the story behind his name?
His real name is Kevin Moore, but somehow it got shortened to Keb' Mo. And if you just check out Slow Down, you'll be a fan.
Yeah, no, it was it was not what I was expecting from just, when you were speaking about Americana, I guess I had a different mindset for it.
Yeah.
And then once I started listening, I got it. I got exactly what you were saying.
Yes.
And but in terms of other styles of music, so say something like reggae or ska or something on that, is that something that you've ever dabbled in or listened to?
Ska, a little. I appreciate reggae. I mean, it sounds kind of weird, I guess, coming from this head-banging old guy. But no, reggae is absolutely... And actually, Ziggy Marley opened for Tedeschi Trucks.
Oh, that's funny.
When I saw them in Connecticut earlier this summer. And yeah, Ziggy can do it, man.
Well, but so again, right, what I love about music is the universality of it. It's a language unto itself. And we're all just kind of listening to different dialects, right? And so reggae, for me, is similar to the blues or to, gospel music or different things where it's about that vibe and that feel.
Gospel, I think, is a great way to put it. And it's not gospel. I mean, obviously, if you've listened to reggae, but almost every song is about peace.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, they yeah, I am a peacenik. Come on, Marvin Gaye told us a long time ago, war's not the answer. Only love can conquer hate. I mean, it sounds trite, but it's true.
No, but it's true. And again, right, I mentioned Irish music before. There's a strong cultural history there of protest music in Ireland. And I hear some of that
justifiably,
right? But in reggae too, right? Like it's a different. It's more about, again, preaching peace in terms of reggae, preaching peace and upholding the culture. In Ireland, it's tough because it's sort of divided, right? So it's a much different situation musically,
right? Even
the Irish step dancing and stuff, right? It's a protest. We just protest everything. That's
well, and they do, and to this man's way of thinking, they have every right to be upset. Give them their damn country back.
Right. Right.
All of it.
And musically...
Oh, sorry. No more politics.
Yeah. But no, well, it's funny because I was thinking of that earlier this morning too, right? And how there's sort of a different... Just difference in terms of the music from the Republic of Ireland, I don't even really know. I can't think of any music from the north of Ireland. I just sort of group it in with like England and, you know, which is whird because I don't know if there's necessarily an English sound to me. The English sound, look at that. See? Because I thought of like the biggest acts. There are so many that came from England between the Stones, the Beatles, Adele, Oasis. There were all these, you know, unbelievably
so
selling
good.
groups. Right.
Yeah.
But I don't know that there's an identifiable sound in the same way. Like if there's an English sauna, you know, outside of a certain
If you
stretch
had
of time.
just pigeonholed it to the 60s, yes, you had a sound.
Right, exactly.
It was because it was basically pop. But, I mean, it was the beginnings of, you know, music as we know it today. But, I remember the saying, if you wanted to hear American blues done bad, you just had to go listen to the Rolling Stones. That was the early 60s.
Right.
When they first started, because they were just absolutely in love with, you know, the blues. And they didn't really know how to play it, but obviously they learned.
Yeah, they figured it out. But England's interesting in the same way that the U.S. is, where, and again, to be fair, right, this is probably any country, any place in the world, but the geographical differences lead to changes in sound. So,
and actually, I think the phrase that fits best is melting pot.
Yeah.
Because you have so many different influences all coming in together. And even, like I said, in England, how the sound differed, you know, from where, because Birmingham, you had the lower to middle class, and you had Black Sabbath with their heavy, you know, metal, and you had the Yardbirds and Cream, and, you know, when you got down closer to London, so it's a different sound. It's lighter, I guess, but not that it wasn't, you know, heavy.
No, but more refined, more, you know,
refined.
urbane.
Better, yeah, there you go.
But it's interesting too. The further you get out to the countryside, right? Again, like working class people, like you know, Sting grew up in, I think it was like a port town, and that influence. It's funny, you don't necessarily hear it in his sound per se, but it undeniably shaped him as a person and as a musician.
As it would for pretty much anyone. I mean, again, going back to the blues, these people grew up on cotton farms, and that was the hardest way in the world to make a living. And you could hear it in their sound. That's the blues.
Right.
You know you got the blues when you're picking cotton for 14 hours a day.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And I don't know what made me think of that in terms of England. I guess I'd be curious, too, with Canada, because Canada is even more difficult to do.
Yeah.
Well, no, you know, Neil Young, you've got so many different...
Yeah, Neil Young... yeah.
But nobody is so... I shouldn't say nobody. Well, right. So Rush, I think, is like the quintessential... I think if people think of Canadian music, it's Rush, it's Nickelback, Bryan Adams.
Yeah.
You know, there's...
And they forget Neil Young is Canadian.
Right.
Because he really had more fame with Buffalo Springfield and then Crosby, Stills. Right. You know?
But none of them, I would say, oh, that's a Canadian sound. Yeah. You know, Rush was its own thing.
Right, getting back to America, too. The Beach Boys, surf music, that's the West Coast.
Right.
You know, and you had...
and Jimmy Buffett's the East Coast. Bob the Clock somewhere.
Right, well, yeah, he's the Keys.
Right.
Jimmy Buffett is, Florida at its best.
Well, I could hear some Jimmy Buffett up here. I think it stretches all the way.
Well, hey, we're all parrot heads at some time.
Right.
Right.
So I can't imagine not listening to music in the car. Because to me, a road trip, in and of itself, it has its own soundtrack.
Always.
And I mean, no more indicative of that than like when Heather and I did our first cross-country road trip. We wound up, this was the first time, I'll backpedal a little bit. So growing up, we never flew anywhere. All of the family vacations that we took were between Maine in the Northeast, Pennsylvania in the West, and as far south as Virginia. So I never even made it to North Carolina, which used to kill me because the landlord's daughter and their family would go to North Carolina every year. She would rub it in like incessantly.
Yes.
So,
and now you know there's really nothing much to see in North Carolina. Except the coast.
That's true. Yeah. 95 wasn't terribly great. But we, you know, so in 05, we graduated. That was my first time going to Florida, Disney, all that stuff or whatever. But all it did was just stoke that wanderlust that I've always had to go cross country. And it was, I mean, you've done it, so you know, it's for me, it was a spiritual experience going, first of all, just getting to Ohio, which I can't think of many people that have said that in such a phrase, but
No.
but the reason why was like, I finally felt like the West was open to me, right? Like this frontier that I had always dreamed of.
Right, because you saw all the movies with the wagon trains going west, and I get that.
Yeah, and our wagon train was a Seafoam Blue Toyota Echo, which Seafoam Blue? Seriously? Seafoam Green I get because, you know, Seafoam is green, but the blue, I don't get it. But anyway.
Well, you didn't go to the islands where the water is blue.
Yeah, well, but the water, the seawater blue works, but Seafoam.
Yeah, but the foam, okay.
Yeah. But we can agree to disagree. No.
There you go.
So for me, I remember, you know, the agrarian expanse, like most people complain about flyover country. And at least the first time I drove
Well, there is a reason you fly over them. Yeah, because there's really not much to see.
No, but there was, but
it's different. No. I absolutely get it. Yeah, because it is. It's America.
But it was that, and also the fact that I grew up in Brooklyn, so you're asshole to elbow with people and buildings and everything.
Yeah.
There's no open space, which, as an asterisk, big sky country really is big sky country. Montana, Wyoming, I'll never forget.
I have not been to either, but yeah, I can imagine.
And well, that's just it. I thought I could too until you're actually
there.
It's such an unbelievable experience. And to a lesser extent, the agrarian, you know, expanses, again, Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, definitely Iowa, and then Nebraska. Yes, it does get repetitive and boring, but it's also like, it's just amazed me that you could see as far as you could. But in terms of the soundtrack, which was, again,
but Kansas, just nothing but undulating.
Yeah.
Moguls, not hills. They're just too small to be a hill, and it just goes on and on.
So funny with the only time I was just gonna say, we got into Kansas right around evening, and all I saw was these tumultuous, horrific thunderclouds that I have never seen before. We stop at the first rest area, and everyone's freaking out because there's all sorts of tornado warnings and stuff. So that was my experience driving through quote unquote Kansas, because we got to Topeka.
Yeah, you got to Kansas, and it was 1954 again.
Yeah, Elmira Gulch comes whizzing past on her bike, her e-bike, right? Updated for the times, but no. So I didn't really get. So my experience was more, you know, sphincter
tightening,
tightening in Kansas than anything else. But I get it, and so for me, Nebraska was an unexpected great part of that cross country trip that we took previously, because it starts out the same in the east, you know, as all farmland, but when you hit the offshoot for 76. It's suddenly there's these hillocks and, you know, just boulders and things that are coming out of nowhere. And then all of a sudden you get to this point where you can see the Rockies come over the horizon. Right. And it was just, again, a really amazing experience. And so when Heather and I went, we stopped at the Buffalo Bill grave site. And in the gift shop, they had these CDs, and it was Desert Guitar was the name of it. So it was a combination of nature sounds with acoustic guitar instrumentation. And when I got it, we were in Colorado for another day or two, and then we were continuing west. So I threw it in once we got into Utah, and holy shit, it couldn't have been a better backdrop, sonic backdrop for what we saw.
For Utah.
Yeah, no, it was, but that stayed with me, because then when I started to write The Lion in the Desert, and I got to those sections in the aforementioned desert, I needed something to kind of like channel that. And so I threw that CD on, and even though it conjured, you know, memories and images from the road trip, it helped to sort of set the stage and set that environment. But I can't imagine being on a road trip and not listening to music, not having something. I mean, there are people out there that do sports radio, or I don't know what they listen to. But.
No, well, oddly enough, I drive a car that has no radio right now because, for whatever reason, people like the antenna to a 2006 Hyundai Tiburon.
Oh, man.
We had 3 just broken off and stolen, and there's no point in replacing it, I guess.
Right.
I mean, I have a CD player, so I listen to what I want to.
Right.
But again, I'm in the car for 5 to 10 minutes, so I just drive in silence. But anytime my wife and I take trips, you know, Adele is big, and because that's something we can both agree on.
So
my wife doesn't really like my music much.
no, but listen, Adele. It's funny. I just had her on. I was coming back from one of the basketball things with the kids, and I think they were confused because they were like, "Really, like Adele? Why are you putting that on?" But I have such an extensive digital collection of music. It was just was the first letter, obviously, that popped up, and I said, "Bam, that's it. I'm going for it." But
good.
but I just love the idea of having music. Like again, if we're driving,
music is the backdrop of life.
Yeah.
Say your words, Michael. Yeah. No, I mean, I said it before. I always have some song banging around in my brain. It just, it's just, that's life.
Yeah, and I'm excited for Tim, who's starting high school not this September but the following September, because we were having a discussion in the pool one night. We were doing a night swim kind of thing, and I tried to explain to him how, I'm trying to think of the way I worded it, that high school with any luck will be the best 4 years of his life so far.
Right.
But if he lives his life correctly, they won't be the best 4 years of his life.
Oh no, but they'll be the best at the time.
Right.
And he has to remember the first couple weeks might be tough adjusting to high school, because it really is kind of like a culture shock.
Yeah, but music has a lot to do with it too, and that's what I was getting at in terms of the high school part. Like, I feel like and I don't know if this is just an American thing or not, but I feel like every kid has some sort of music that they connect with, that they use as an outlet, an emotional, just again outlet for all the angst and all the stuff that you go through as a teenager.
Yeah.
And it'll be interesting to see with him what happens, because his age group here in town, they just listen to like the modern popular rap stuff, and it's whatever, it is what it is. I'm not judging anybody for what they listen to,
no.
But there's stuff that you listen to because you like it, and stuff that you listen to
because everybody does. Yeah.
And I don't know,
so you don't have a choice because that's what everybody's playing.
Yeah, Tim's favorite song is Baker Street. I mean, that says a lot about like number one all-time favorite song, Jerry Rafferty. Right?
I was going, Jerry Rafferty. Wow, where'd that come from?
Exactly. Well, it came from. Funny enough, it all ties together, right? Yeah. So the Grand Theft Auto video game.
See, I wouldn't understand that because I've never been a video game kind of guy.
Right, and for GTA,
Too old.
the GTA series specifically, it's
now my son would get that reference.
Right.
But,
it's viewed harshly because it's inherently violent. It's no different than watching a movie, really, in terms of like the violence and stuff. You're just in control of it. But one of the things that I love, and I'm definitely in a minority here, is you can get in a vehicle that you could either purchase or steal. That's neither here nor there. But there's actual music. There are radio DJs. And if I wanted to, I can, in the context of the game, fly over, shoot over to the Paleto Bay, highway, and just listen to these songs. And they have classic rock stations. They have all different kinds of things. And so for him, because that's what I gravitated towards when I was playing the game, and he would hang out and watch it, he started to like a lot of that stuff too. The Cult, just again, random one-off songs that were cultivated for these playlists. Yeah. And is it Greg Kihn or Greg Kihn, the Greg Kihn band?
Greg Kihn.
Greg Kihn, yeah.
Yeah.
So there was a song from him. There was another, Alan Parsons Project.
Alan Parsons Project. Wow. Now you're getting that somewhat obscure.
Yeah, and Tim knows songs from all these groups because of the game. You know, and not that I'm trying to say that offsets any of the psychological
violence.
I guess we'll find out.
Come on, when we were younger parents, with a little boy, we were adamant that no guns. Well, he would pick up a stick and it was a gun.
Right.
So it's just inherent in the nature, I guess.
Right.
That's what kids are going to do.
Right. And I think it depends.
Doesn't make it bad. Just
no, and it's also active parenting, right? Like
as long as you explain, the difference.
Exactly, and monitoring too, right?
Oh, absolutely, sure.
There was a stretch where he was playing it a little too frequently. That a couple of years ago, and Heather and I weren't as comfortable with like some of the things he was saying or whatever,
Sure.
And so, but it turned into a discussion, and
Yes, right. It's right called parenting, right? And more people need to do a lot more of that, just because we're responsible for these little people, that we're raising. And yeah.
Yeah. And for me, music has been such an important part of parenting. I remember when Heather was pregnant with Tim, I played on guitar. I think I played three or 400 different songs while she was pregnant with him, because they said, oh, music, music is good for the baby. And later on, especially the final, I'd say 2 months, she said that she could feel a difference. Like he's, started swimming around, I guess. I don't know.
Oh, well, yeah. Well, the final 2 months, they do a lot of that anyway.
Maybe he was covering his ears.
Actually,
right?
that could be. We were joking about that, again, with my daughter. Roxanne would say, like, when she, 7 and 8 months pregnant, she could actually see, like, an arm butting out of her stomach and, or an elbow or a knee. It's like, well, the baby's moving. I'm like, holy crap.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was...
The day before he was born, the night before he was born, so literally hours, it was the same thing. And Heather was pointing out, she's like, "Oh, that's an elbow," and I'm looking at it, and I'm like, I've watched. Put it this way, I've watched too much sci-fi, especially Outer Limits, not to have been concerned that elbow wasn't actually a tail, or
But it's wow. Just thinking back on it, it's such a spiritual experience. I mean, that's your child. It's like, holy crap.
Well, I felt that way once I saw him in his human form, which was...
Well, it's still in the belly. I could get the concern, but...
But it was great. And I remember, too, like, at one point, it was either his butt or his back. Like, all of a sudden, I was just like, holy shit, like, he needs a little more room in there.
Yeah. Well, and again, Heather's very small as well. Like, Roxanne's just a tiny woman, and, like... How the hell is the room for that kid in there?
Well, so it was funny because when, I don't remember what visit it was, but somewhere along the way, the pediatrician asked, not the pediatrician, the obstetrician asked what our birth weights were. And I said 6 pounds, 9 ounces. And he goes, that's the perfect weight. And so Heather and I have this thing where it's always like, I always wind up one-upping her unintentionally. Like, I believe her blood type is a B positive or B plus. Mine's an A positive, A plus. So it's just always been that kind of shit. Oh, it's hilarious. So so she was 6 pounds, 10 ounces as a baby.
Oh, so she was...
Not only was she bigger, but he said something to the effect of like, yeah, we just don't want it to be any bigger than that or something. And I was done. So for years, I lorded that over her. I was like, you were a giant baby is what he was trying to say. Like, they were going to have to cut you out with the jaws of life.
1 ounce was all the difference, huh?
Tim comes out, 6 pounds, 9.9 ounces.
Oh.
And I was like, it was meant to be.
Yeah.
But then Jackson was 7 pounds, 7 ounces. He was
That's
huge. He was
big,
a human, just older. It was crazy.
Yeah.
And then Sarah was 5 pounds, 13 ounces, the tiniest baby that I've held. Right. And now you look at the three of them, and they're all they all leveled out more or less.
So, absolutely. Yeah.
But yeah. No. So
if the doctor had asked, how much did you weigh when you were born? I'm like, how do I know? I was a baby.
Right.
I mean, come on.
Yeah, it's funny you say that. I don't know why I know that, like,
I
the
have
birth
no
time
clue.
and all that.
I have no clue. Yeah, and unfortunately, I don't have a parent to ask.
Right. Yeah, I can't think of.
And even if they were here, they probably wouldn't know because they'd be in their 90s.
Well, I was going to say, yeah, if you got an answer, I don't even know if you'd really, want to be able to believe it.
Yeah, exactly. But again, getting back to, the soundtrack of, I guess, your life. When you take them trips, you got to have, and you traveled much more extensively by auto than I ever did. I mean, I had some pretty interesting car rides, but I haven't covered the whole country, like that. Music is just a part of life. And,
I think it's one of the best parts of life.
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. Well, come on. John Miles.
Yeah.
The song is titled Music, but first love and it'll be your last.
Yeah. And I would say of all of the musical discussions we've had, or all of the music that you turned me on to, that's by far the best. I don't think anything can top that.
I'm glad you think that way, because it really is a rather obscure CD, and
which is what makes it all the more special, for me anyway.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I honestly do not know anyone else that has listened to that entire CD, and it means a lot to me, that CD, because the first song, music, and also the last song, because they do. But when you lose someone so young, because I lost my brother at 18, and it's something that I still think about, and it is. Let's see, that was 1978, so we're yeah.
Yeah, but that's the power of music, right? Is that it can give you, it can help with the grief and the sorrow. It can also uplift you. It depends. It's and that's what I love about music too. Is you can listen to the same song in 2 different days and have different responses to it, or whatever. And that's, I don't know. I think that's. It's obviously not innately human, right? Because you have birds that sing, like they're different animals, but you could.
It's right. It's a form of communication, for in the bird, world.
Yeah, but even for us too. I think that's. I was going to go in the other direction, but I'll come off of that because I think it is a form of communication. We're communicating. Whether it's through, and this is a big thing for me, right? Like I don't know. I've always had this innate need, not even a drive or a desire, but an innate need to express myself creatively, and music helps with that. Writing, like I'm not a good poet, but occasionally I'll write something that poetry wise, I think that, that's a whole separate topic, because to me poetry and music go hand in hand. I haven't written
in years, but when I was younger I did write quite a bit.
Yeah, and
I still have some of them somewhere, and like, you should do this more. Like, sorry, I moved on.
Well, that's just it. The best poems, and I say the best, that's not, that's putting it loosely in terms of my poetry output. But there's something about a poem where it's the same as a song, like my job, my writing philosophy, if I've never mentioned this, is, or I did reference it earlier, but I never expressed it explicitly, is I feel like whatever I'm writing, whether it's fiction, a 110,000 word novel, or a poem, or nonfiction, there are perfect words, and it's my job as a writer to find those perfect words and to arrange them in the perfect order. Now that rarely happens, but it has happened before.
It's kind of impossible to do perfect
all the time. But there are times.
Oh no, it's impossible to do perfect. Period. Stop. You can approach perfection.
So from a conscious standpoint, I will concede that, because anytime that I've tried to do perfect, I couldn't.
Usually when you screw up more.
However,
you have to kind of.
I have had moments, especially recently with this one poem, where like I was in a dead sleep and I woke up. It was funny. I looked like Frankenstein's monster jolting awake. I woke up from a dead sleep and went, "Oh shit!" Like.
And you have to write it down then, because if you don't, you lose it.
I had the iPad on the floor. I had the iPad on the floor for that exact reason. And my thumbs start flying. And again, in terms of perfection, I would never say that this is a great poem or whatever. What it was, though, and what it wound up being, was
caught your feeling at that time.
It was the perfect expression of what I was trying to convey. Okay. And that's what I meant. In terms of achieving perfection, I didn't write that. Right. That I was a conduit for these words that came through me and captured exactly to a T what I was feeling, thinking, what I wanted to go through. And again, it's happened occasionally with writing. And the difference with novel writing, it may be one sentence in an entire section, but I just get the same feeling now, 20 years after I wrote it, of this was great.
I really captured that at that time. And that I agree with poetry in that it captures the absolute essence of what you were thinking, feeling at that particular moment in time.
Right. And the thing with a poem too is there's 2 other aspects of it. One is, it's even more imperative because of the inherent, and there are poems that are exceedingly long, right? I mean, Paradise Lost is a poem. The Trinity of poems, I'm blanking on it. The Divine Comedy, there we go, from Dante.
The 119th Psalm.
Right. So there are poems that are excessively inherently long, but by their nature here, typical poems are shorter, and so the word choice becomes even more paramount, even more important. And that's where the connection to me is with music and songs, because nobody wants to listen to a 45-minute long song. Like it's just not. Like, I shouldn't say nobody, but it ain't getting on the radio.
Rare. Oh, no. Yeah, sure. Yeah, you're right. You can't put that on the radio. Right. Well, 1969, they did.
Right. There's pirate radio. Like, people can do that.
No,
but
even, like CBS, WNEW would play the whole album side. And, But,
well, that's fair, right? So if you want to think of it
that's not 45
way,
minutes, mind you, but it's pretty close. And I've heard In-A-Gadda-Da-Vida played in its entirety on the air, and that's I don't know how long.
That's a great separate deep dive into conspiracy theories and stuff. The background of that song and the guy's involvement with like the Manhattan Project or something. It was crazy. But what I love about song lyrics is it has to come to an end, right? With the story. You can, I mean, how many different, I can't think of any series off the top of my head, but I mean, there are some, lines of books that are still ongoing decades in, right? Yeah. It's the same story that's still perpetuating. Poems, they have to end. Like,
they're finite.
Right. And so the meaning comes as much, but with a poem, and again, this is that overlap with music and song lyrics, the poem doesn't doesn't get its meaning from only the words, right? It's also the delivery. It's if I were to show you that poem that I wrote and just slap it on a piece of paper and hand it to you, you're going to get the general meaning of it, but you're going to lose so much of the real meaning because that comes in the cadence, the pauses, the breaths, all those things that are static and dead on a page. And so in the same way as with a song, like that's what really brings the lyrics to life. It's the performance. It's
absolutely.
The context with the music.
Yeah. It applies in all areas. I mean, if you're delivering a speech for whatever subject, if you're doing a eulogy, it's the inflection that you'll use at a certain time. And delivery is half the game.
Right. And I think that it's not native to every style of writing, like you said. Like, obviously anything that's oral, like, again, nonfiction or speech or eulogy or whatever, like that definitely comes into play. But I guess for me, the top tier would be, poetry and song lyrics, just because there's extra meaning. So when you're giving a eulogy or a speech, the meaning is usually concrete. Yeah. You're talking about a specific topic or whatever. But with music especially, the meaning can be different for different people. We had that discussion the last time about
absolutely, right, because a song that means the world to me might mean Jack to you. Right. Of course.
I mean, for a while, Jack is the world to me.
I can get
Mr.
that.
Daniels.
Yeah, and Jackson.
Yeah.
But you can hear that song on another day when you're in a different place, and then you might understand what I was saying that particular time.
Right.
I mean, music, the eye of the beholder, if you will. I don't know. It's.
I think it evolves along with us.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. And when you hear it or how you hear it, are you receptive? Are you just kind of in your own world at that time?
But it's interesting too. There was an astrophysicist named Neil deGrasse Tyson, and I'm going to butcher his.
Yes, I know him.
I'm going to butcher this quotation, but somebody asked him once why he doesn't have any tattoos, and the general thrust of what he was saying was, there's nothing that I'm so confident of now in my life that I expected will continue to bring me happiness 20 years from now. And again, completely butchered the quotation, but the spirit of it is there in the sense
absolutely.
that there could be a song that you have with somebody that makes you think of that person. And then there's maybe comes a point in your life where you don't want to think about that person, or it hurts to think about that person.
You hear this all the time about how somebody went and got the tattoo of, Tammy on his arm because, that's his love. And, then he marries somebody named Janet and uh-oh.
Right. Exactly.
What's that? Yeah, you got to get it changed. But just to be argumentative, I could disagree in that I can't imagine ever not being so totally enamored of my children that I would regret having a tattoo of either one of them on my body somewhere, although I don't I never have and never will get a tattoo.
Well, it's funny. That's not really being argumentative because that was the conclusion that I drew too. When I was thinking of,
Right.
I said I'm not an absolute guy. I don't like
Yeah,
always and never.
right. I never hate. I do not like absolutes at all. Yeah,
Right. And so my immediate reaction to that was thinking, well, there's got to be something. And, you know, again, right, like some people get the tattoo of their kids' names, God forbid, you know, there's a loss of a child or something.
Yeah.
You know,
well, that would make it all the more poignant.
that's what I was going to say.
Sure.
I think people, exactly. I think it just changes the meaning of it at that point.
Yeah.
I guess to close out, one of the things that I'm most excited about with my kids is seeing their own individual musical journeys because they are interested in such a broad swath of music, even more than I was at their age.
Yeah.
And Jackson, you know, for his birthday, a friend just got him his first piece of sheet music to try to learn because he's been teaching himself stuff on the piano. And
so cool.
Yeah, she had said like, here, I'm going to get this for you now. I know, you know, it's going to take you a while to learn it, but then someday
You'll play it.
I hope
for
you
me,
learn it
sure.
and play it right, which I thought
Yeah.
was super cool.
That is awesome.
And so he's taking to music and
So he's a real womanizer, huh? It's Jackson. Good boy at 9.
well, it was
Got women giving him sheet music already.
and it was funny because the same friend had sent a birthday message for Sarah, and I mentioned that to Jackson, and I said, oh, you know, she'll probably send one. She had sent it to me via text to share with the kids. And so I made the mistake of telling him, I said, oh yeah, you know, like I'm sure she'll send one for you too. And he got quiet for a second and he's like, well, you know, Dad, if you want, you can just give her my watch number and then she can send it straight to me. And I was like, all right, easy there, Tiger. Like,
Yeah, down boy.
yeah. So that was kind of funny. But no, but he loves to engage with music more than any of of either Tim or Sarah. So it's funny. Tim is definitely the music appreciator. I don't think he'll ever get involved with playing
Sounds like me.
Right.
I love music, but I can't play a lick.
Sarah plays.
Can't sing a lick either.
No, I think you've got that down, and that's what I hope that they get into singing. At least Sarah and Jackson, because I'll hear them, but they haven't really like gone to it. But the seeds are there, and it's one of those things. Just like with basketball or sports, it's nothing I wanted to lead them towards. But I'm excited to, you know, accompany them on their own journey if they get there themselves.
Yeah.
And, you know, musically, it's exciting for me to see how creative Jackson is specifically, which now I just remembered yet another story I'll have to tell you when we finish up.
Again, off the air. Sorry, folks.
That one I'll have to get something on the phone to show you because it's something. But he's been on an artistic kick lately where he's doing a lot of drawing and again, what I would consider self-expression.
So cool. Yeah.
Yeah, and not just to draw.
All parents feel that way. That's just like you just want to. I shouldn't say all parents because generalizing, but yeah, no. As a parent, you just wanted them to express themselves in a way that made them happy,
right?
And if he's going that way artistically, that's just too cool.
Yeah, and Sarah is finally getting into fashion, and you know, which again, that's a whole separate. No. It's important to me because one of the things that I've been really concerned about with her, just in the society and specifically the town that we live in, is making sure that she maintains a positive body image and she doesn't go through a lot of the stuff that girls her age do, and it takes a lot of work.
That's
of
so
preempting
hard too, because it's something that is maybe not totally out of your control, but so much out of your control that, you know, because it's her mind, you know, and you,
exactly. And so
all we can be is supportive and positive. And,
as much as I goof where, you know, I talk about when she starts bringing boys home that I'll be here cleaning the shotgun on the table and, pointing out how long it
5-page questionnaire before you can even come to the door.
let them know how long it actually takes a human hand to dissolve in a vat of acid. You know, those types of things.
Yeah.
If
I remember them days.
Right. If I'm being honest with myself, right? If I do my job as a father correctly, she will respect herself enough, hopefully, to make better choices. But they're her choices to make largely. And then clearly there are rooms where instances where dad's going to have to step in. The mindset that I was taking with the body image stuff and self-confidence, I figured to be more proactive and preemptive was better. And so, it's funny. I'm only now myself getting into fashion and stuff. It's again part of like a big evolution, for myself,
what's fashion?
Right.
I don't know.
But I've always had an eye for picking things out for other people. And so for Sarah, like it's something that we've loosely explored together, but I could see she was reticent to wear something that maybe revealed a little bit of her stomach or whatever.
And that odd that you would mention that, because my
You love
daughter,
wearing belly shirts?
Oh, no. My daughter used to love the clothes that I would pick out for my wife.
Oh.
And my wife would routinely return anything that I bought because she didn't like it.
That's
but my
funny.
daughter would be like, Mom, that's gorgeous. That's perfect. Nope.
Not a fan of it?
No. My wife didn't like my taste in clothes much.
That's funny. Well, and I mean, there's all...
Hey, she liked me.
That was enough. Right. It's in the eye of the beholder. But with Sarah, it was more, making sure that she was comfortable and confident in whatever she had. And for her, her self-expression now of late is less musically inclined and more, with clothing and stuff like that, which is fine. She's 11, so,
Yeah. Oh, no. That perfectly normal and
Or she's one teen. That's how I describe it, because she's a little bit ahead.
She's a tween now. Yes, so it's such a fun time.
Yeah, and so it's cool for me to see them express themselves and to appreciate it, and it's exciting too because in terms of the age spectrum, right? Like I love that you and I can have these musical discussions and see the appreciation that you have and have always had for it, and to see them be at the start of their journey is not that you're at the end of yours. That got morbid.
No,
that got morbid really quick.
No, I didn't take it that way. And to see that they actually have some of the same opinions that we have expressed. That's so cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Although you just made me think about. Now this is going way, way back. I can remember when my daughter was, I want to say 5, might have been 6, and my wife would put clothes on her bed for school for the next day, and the hands on the hip. I'm not wearing that.
Oh boy!
So it starts early, and now your daughter's into fashion. So
100%.
Well, I can see her and Heather butting heads about what will be appropriate to wear at times.
It was good for Sarah though, because we had her do, it's called Reach Your Potential Training, RIPT, RYPT.
Okay.
And it was a fitness program, strength conditioning, all that, and she loved it. Had a physical transformation, but also, more importantly, a self-confidence transformation.
That's the most important part.
And I think that, in part, is what led her to be a little more adventurous, let's say, with
fashion,
with what she was saying, because she felt it. And honestly, I can attest to it myself. So
that's half the battle right there. As long as she's comfortable with herself,
right? And
that's.
And we've had
game over, really.
We haven't had this discussion at length yet, but like there were times when she was younger, maybe 7 or 8, and we'd be out at the mall and we would see these girls with their butt cheeks hanging out, and she would say, like, she would make a comment about it, like, well, I don't understand why they would do that, and so it was a discussion about self-respect and what the attention you're drawing intentionally and unintentionally, and how do you handle that? If you're not mature enough to understand the full scope of what you're doing, you probably shouldn't be doing it.
So, no, I couldn't agree more on that, because it's, well.
Although, Mike, I got to say,
censor myself.
The Daisy Dukes you're wearing today, they do highlight those cheeks quite nicely.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh man,
You like cottage cheese?
and that, I mean, that's a wrap. There's no better.
What else
there's no better place to leave. So, Mike, this is always a pleasure.
My pleasure entirely. I enjoy these talks so much. I can't even express it. It's I leave feeling so uplifted and ready for the day.
Same. Yeah, no, this was great. And I appreciate you coming back. I know, 3 times in the summer, that's a lot of me to take from people who, don't live here. So I appreciate that.
Goes both ways. I'm better in small doses.
Oh, yeah, you know what? Mix I was going to say mix it right into some banana cream pie.
There you go.
Oh man.
And we won't discuss that either.
Well, thank you to Mike English for completing the musical trifecta. We definitely zigged and zagged today, so mission accomplished.
There you go. My pleasure again.
I'm sure there'll be more in the future, but I appreciate especially with the change in season and going back to school and everything. I think it was a perfect time.
Thanks, ruined my day
To do this. That's it.
Next Thursday, I'll see you all, guys.
That's it. I know. Counting down the days already.
Indeed.
But thank you to my friend Mike English for coming and hanging out, and thank you to everybody listening wherever and whenever you are.